I screamed as I felt my son's third child push through me. The pain was like fire, but not just in my body, in my soul. I was a mother giving birth, but not to a child of love. I was a grandmother, delivering the third baby for my own son. I lay there, soaked in sweat, my hands gripping the mat on the floor, biting down on a rag to stop myself from screaming out the truth. Outside, neighbors passed by like it was any other day. No one knew. No one cared. And the ones who knew, they looked the other way. After all, I was a widow, a lonely old woman broken by life. Who would care what became of me? As I held the newborn in my arms, I looked into his innocent eyes, wondering what kind of curse I was living under. But just as I tried to sit up, the door flew open. My sister-in-law stood there, her eyes wide with shock as she stared at the baby. And at me. She had seen everything. But how did I, a normal woman, a mother, a widow, end up in such a nightmare? It all started many years ago when my husband, Henry, died from a sudden heart attack. We had been together for 30 years. He was a strict man, but he provided for us. He never let me work, never let me speak much. My only duty was to serve him and raise our only child, Brian. Brian was quiet and smart. He didn't have many friends, and he loved me dearly. After Henry's death, the house became cold and empty. Brian was just 16 when it happened, and I was only 49. I didn't cry much when my husband died. Deep inside I felt free, like I could finally breathe. But I didn't know that the worst days of my life were just beginning. In the first few months after Henry's funeral, people visited a lot. The neighbors brought food, friends came to check on us, and the church sent someone every Sunday. But slowly they all stopped coming. Became invisible. I was just the quiet widow who always wore black. Brian was my only light. He helped me with everything. Cooking, cleaning, even walking me to the market. We became very close. Too close. I remember the first time something felt off. It was a rainy night, and the roof was leaking. The wind was howling, and the power had gone out. Brian brought a candle to my room and sat beside me on the bed. He was 17 by then, taller than me, with his father's sharp jaw and dark eyes. He looked at me not like a son but like something else. Felt it. A deep, strange stare. Pushed the thought away. But it got worse. One night, I woke up and found him lying beside me. He said he was scared of the storm. I was half asleep, and I let him stay. But then he started touching me, softly, like he was testing me. Froze. My body was too tired to fight. I whispered, "Don't." He pulled away and apologized. The next morning he acted like nothing happened. I wanted to believe it was just a mistake. But it wasn't. Weeks passed, and Brian grew bolder. He became possessive, angry when I spoke to other men at the market. He watched me as I dressed. He touched me again, this time harder. I tried to fight him, but he was stronger. He told me I was the only woman he needed. He said we were alone in this world and had to survive together. I went to the pastor's wife to talk, but as soon as I began to explain, she waved me off and said, "You're a widow. You're just lonely. Don't confuse attention with sin." I never spoke of it again. The abuse continued. Brian started locking my phone, cutting me off from the outside world. He stopped going to school and stayed home with me all day. I cried in the bathroom. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror. Then I missed my period. I thought it was menopause. But my belly began to swell. I knew I was pregnant. My own son's baby was growing inside me. I wanted to run, to scream, to die. But where could I go? I was too ashamed, too broken. And everyone who should have helped had already abandoned me. When the baby came, I delivered alone in the room. Boy. I named him Hope, but there was no hope in me. Brian promised he'd never touch me again. But he did. Again and again. The second baby came 2 years later, a girl. I named her Grace. The third child, born just now, I hadn't named yet. I was too numb. But now, with my sister-in-law standing there, watching me hold the child in my arms, everything was about to explode. Her lips trembled. Her hand covered her mouth. Her voice was shaky as she whispered, "Is that Brian's baby?" I looked down. My lips didn't move. I didn't have to answer. She stepped forward slowly, like approaching a wild animal. "How long?" she asked, her voice breaking. The wind howled outside, but the silence between us was louder. Suddenly, she turned and ran out of the room, shouting for the neighbors. I grabbed the baby and held him close. Everything was about to fall apart. I wrapped the baby in an old cloth and held him close to my chest. My heart pounded like a drum. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. My sister-in-law, Margaret, had seen it all, me, the baby, the truth. She had run out of the room shouting, her voice echoing through the compound. I could hear her calling neighbors by name. Come and see what's going on in the widow's house." I knew what was coming. Shame, judgment, maybe even the police. My knees shook as I tried to stand up. I needed to hide. I needed to think. I whispered to the baby, "Please don't cry," and walked into the back room where no one ever went. I closed the door and sat in the dark, rocking him slowly. Outside I heard voices. Many voices. What did she say? Whose baby is it? Is it true? I heard Margaret shouting, "She's sick. She's not normal. She had babies with her own son." A woman gasped. Someone shouted, "Lies. That can't be." But then I heard Brian's voice. Cold. "Get away from my mother's house." My heart froze. What would Brian do now that the truth was out? Would he deny everything? Would he hurt someone? I didn't have time to think. The door burst open. Brian stepped into the room, his eyes burning with anger. He looked at the baby in my arms and then at me. "Why didn't you stop her?" he asked, his voice low and tight. "She saw me," I whispered. "She saw everything." Brian took a deep breath. "You told her." "I didn't have to," I said, tears filling my eyes. "She walked in." He clenched his fists. I thought he was going to hit me. Instead, he turned and stormed out again. I didn't follow. I just sat there, rocking the baby, listening as the noise outside grew louder and louder. Then silence. Deep, sudden silence. Minutes passed. I didn't move. Then a knock on the door. Careful. "Mrs. Taylor." It was a man's voice. Officer Daniel, the neighborhood police chief. He had visited once before after Henry's death. "Please open the door," he said. I stood weakly and opened it. He looked at me, then at the baby, then at the floor. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. He nodded. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "People are talking," he said. "They say this baby is your son's. Is it true?" I couldn't speak. "Please," he said. "You need to tell me the truth." I looked into his eyes, and something inside me broke. I nodded slowly. His face stayed calm, but his eyes showed pain. "Where is Brian now?" Shrugged. "He left. I don't know where he went." He pulled out his phone. "I'll send an officer to look for him." "No," said quickly. "Please don't hurt him." "Ma'am," he said, "if what you say is true, this is serious." "I know," I whispered. He sat down on the old chair beside me. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I tried," I said. "No one listened. They told me I was just lonely." He nodded slowly. "This is not your fault," he said. "You were abused." "But he's my son," I cried. "I raised him. I loved him." "I know. And that's what makes this even more painful." He looked at the baby again. "We'll need to do a test. But for now, we have to take you and the baby somewhere safe." My heart sank. "Where?" "There's a shelter for women. You won't be alone. You'll get help." I hesitated, then finally nodded. That night, Officer Daniel drove me and the baby to a hidden home in the next town. It was quiet. I was given a small room, clean sheets, and food. I thought things would get better. But they didn't. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a woman screaming. I ran outside to see what was happening. There at the gate was Brian. He was shouting at the guards. Let me see my mother. She belongs to me. I stepped back, holding the baby tight. He had found me. And he wasn't going to let go. Brian's voice was loud and sharp. I want to see my mother. She's mine. Let me in. The guard stood firm at the gate. Sir, you need to leave. You're not allowed here. She's my mother and the mother of my kids, he shouted. She belongs with me. Every word he spoke felt like a knife through my heart. I held the baby tighter, his small face resting against my chest. My legs shook, and I backed into the room, closing the curtain so he wouldn't see me through the window. The manager of the shelter, Miss Clara, a calm and gentle woman in her 50s, came to my room. He found us, I whispered, trembling. He found me, she nodded. But he won't hurt you here. We've called Officer Daniel. He's on his way. I sat on the bed, my heart pounding. He thinks he owns me, I said, more to myself than to her. He doesn't see me as a mother anymore. Not even as a human being. Miss Clara reached for my hand. He's sick, dear. This isn't love. It's control. And you've been trapped in that house for too long. Tears fell from my eyes. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I should have run years ago, I whispered. But I was afraid. And no one believed me. They all looked at me like I was the problem. Just then we heard the sound of a police siren. Brian was still shouting when Officer Daniel arrived with 2 other officers. I rushed to the window and peeked through the curtain. Brian Taylor, Daniel said, stepping out of the vehicle. You are under arrest for domestic abuse, incest, and child endangerment. You can't arrest me. Brian yelled. She's my mother. She never said no. Those words cut through me like fire. How could he twist everything like that? Officer Daniel didn't flinch. You're coming with us. Brian struggled, screamed, and cursed, but eventually, they cuffed him and pushed him into the back of the police car. As the car drove off, I sank to the floor, holding the baby and sobbing uncontrollably. The nightmare had finally started to end. Or so I thought. In the days that followed, I began to slowly breathe again. The shelter gave me food, clothes, and counseling. Miss Clara helped me register the baby officially. I chose the name Elijah. The Lord is my God. I prayed every night for strength. But healing wasn't easy. Every time I looked at Elijah, I saw Brian. I saw the nights of pain, of crying in silence. I hated myself for what had happened. I hated that I stayed quiet for so long. One day, Miss Clara brought me to a group session with other women. Some had been beaten. Others had been trafficked or abandoned. One woman, Mary, told a story of how her own father had sold her to men when she was just 12. As I listened, I cried. Not just for her, but because for the first time I realized I wasn't alone. You're not dirty, Mary told me after the session. They made you think you were. But you're not. That night, I looked in the mirror for the first time in months. My eyes were tired. My hair was gray. My body felt old. But something new flickered inside me, a spark of life. I wasn't dead. Not yet. Then 2 weeks later I received a letter. It was from Brian. Miss Clara handed it to me carefully. You don't have to read it, she said. But I needed to. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. His handwriting was the same, neat, sharp, cold. Mother, I know they've taken you away and filled your head with lies. Miss you. Need you. Elijah needs me. You are still mine, and I will find you again. Love, Brian. My blood ran cold. He hadn't changed. He hadn't repented. He still believed I belonged to him. I dropped the letter and stepped back. He's still watching me, I whispered. I can feel it. Miss Clara picked up the letter and frowned. We'll move you again, she said. Somewhere farther. Safer. He won't find you. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. Every creak in the floor felt like a footstep. I held Elijah close and whispered, I won't let him hurt you. I won't let him turn you into a monster. But the fear never left. The next morning, as we packed our things to move to a new shelter in another city, one of the women in the shelter came rushing into the hallway. "Miss Clara. Someone broke into the back gate." My heart dropped. We rushed out to the yard. The gate lock had been cut. There were muddy footprints leading up the walkway. And then, just by the window of my room, we saw something chilling. A small red ribbon tied to the window bars. Brian used to tie that kind of ribbon to my wrist every time he made me promise never to leave him. He had found me. Again that I froze as I stared at the red ribbon fluttering on my window bars. My breath caught in my throat. My hands began to shake, and I clutched Elijah tighter against my chest. That ribbon wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a message. Brian had been here. He was watching. He was close. Miss Clara reached out and gently pulled me back from the window. "Go back inside," she said firmly. "Now." The other women in the shelter looked scared too. Some of them had seen their abusers come back after years. We all knew that fear. The fear of being hunted, controlled, owned. Miss Clara called the police again, and within 20 minutes, Officer Daniel returned. "We moved Brian to a holding facility 2 days ago," he said, his eyes scanning the yard. "He shouldn't be anywhere near here." "Well, someone was," Miss Clara replied. "He left that ribbon." She recognized it immediately. I nodded slowly. "He used to tie it on me, after the abuse. He said it was a symbol that I belonged to him." Daniel sighed. "Then we're not dealing with just an abuser anymore. He's obsessed. We're moving you today. Not later. Right now." I didn't argue. By noon, I was in the back seat of a different police car with Elijah sleeping quietly in my arms. We were headed far away. A new town, a new name, a new shelter. But as the car drove through the narrow streets, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. My eyes darted to every corner, every parked car, every face on the road. What if he was following? We arrived at the new shelter by evening. This one was more hidden, surrounded by tall trees and a long fence with heavy locks. They gave me a new room, smaller but warm, and a tiny cradle for Elijah. I sat down and tried to breathe. Really breathe. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. That night I had a dream. I was back in our old house in the kitchen. Brian was a little boy again, sitting at the table eating cereal. He looked up at me and smiled sweetly. "Mom," he said, "do you still love me?" And I didn't answer. When I woke up, my pillow was wet with tears. In the morning, a woman named Lucy visited my room. She was a therapist, soft-spoken with kind eyes and a quiet strength. "I've read your file," she said gently. "But I'd like to hear it from you when you're ready." So I told her. For the first time in my life I told someone everything. Not just about Brian but about Henry too. About the way he controlled me. About the silence in our home. About how Brian grew up seeing a woman who was only allowed to cook, clean and serve. Never speak. Never decide. Never live. Lucy listened without blinking. And when I finished, she didn't judge me. She didn't blame me. She said something that I'll never forget. "Pain gets passed down like inheritance when it's not healed. Your husband broke you, and your son grew up thinking that was love. But that's not your fault." I started to cry. "But I should have protected Brian from Henry. I should have raised him better." "You did the best you could with what you had," she replied. "And now you have the power to stop this cycle with Elijah." I looked down at my baby sleeping beside me. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. He didn't know where he came from. He didn't know the weight of his name. But he deserved better. He deserved truth. He deserved love. In the days that followed, I started to feel stronger. I joined the women in the garden, helping plant herbs and vegetables. I shared my story in the group meetings. Slowly, the shame began to lift. But just as I started to feel a little peace, a letter arrived at the shelter. There was no return address. No name. Just my new name, the one only the shelter staff knew, written in careful handwriting. Inside was a photo. It was me, standing in the garden with Elijah. It had been taken from outside the fence. There was one line written at the bottom of the photo in red ink. "A ribbon never breaks." My hands began to shake. I dropped the photo and screamed. The other women came running. Miss Clara grabbed the photo and gasped. "He found you again." Officer Daniel was called again. "This is no longer just a case of abuse," he said. "He's stalking. And he's dangerous. Please," I begged. "Don't just hide me anymore. Stop him." "We will," he promised. "We'll find him and end this. You don't have to run again." But that night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a kitchen knife under my pillow and Elijah beside me. Every creak in the wood, every whistle in the wind, it all sounded like Brian's footsteps. And at midnight I heard something, a soft scratching sound, right outside my window. I stood up, trembling, and pulled back the curtain. And there, staring straight at me, was Brian. He was standing just outside the window, his face almost pressed against the glass. His eyes were wild, dark, and full of something I couldn't describe. Obsession, rage, and a twisted sense of love all at once. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my chest. For a long moment we just stared at each other through the glass. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile. A sick, broken smile that chilled me to the bone. I gasped and stumbled backward, knocking over Elijah's cradle. The baby woke up and began to cry loudly. I picked him up quickly and screamed, "Help! Someone help!" The scratching stopped. When I looked back, Brian was gone. The door burst open as Miss Clara and 2 guards rushed in. "What happened?" she shouted, scanning the room. "He was here," I cried. "He was right outside the window." One of the guards ran out with a flashlight. The other stayed with us, his eyes darting back and forth. Miss Clara hugged me, holding me tight. "He won't hurt you. We're going to stop him this time." 10 minutes later, Officer Daniel arrived again with 3 more officers. They searched the grounds. They found muddy footprints under my window, the same size as Brian's. Another ribbon tied to the tree. Daniel shook his head. "He's not just watching now. He's getting bolder." "I don't understand," I whispered. "How does he keep finding me?" He sighed. "We think he's following the transportation vans. Or maybe someone inside the system is leaking information." My body trembled. "What do I do? I can't keep running with a baby." Daniel looked serious. "It's time we take this to court. You need to speak out. Give a statement. Press charges fully. No more hiding." My knees felt weak. Court, papers, testifying, telling the whole world what had happened. Every shameful, horrible detail. I nodded slowly. "I'll do it." The next morning, I was escorted to the police station under heavy guard. I gave a full statement. How the abuse started, the pregnancies, the silence, the fear. I told them everything. The officer taking my report couldn't look me in the eye. Her hands shook as she typed. "You're very brave," she whispered. But I didn't feel brave. Felt broken. News spread quickly. I had to stay off the internet. The story made it to the local paper. Widow gives birth to 3 children fathered by her own son. They didn't say my name, but people whispered. I could feel it. Some called me a monster. Some called me a victim. But most said nothing. A week later the trial was set. Brian was caught again, just 1 town away. He had broken into a woman's home, thinking it was another shelter I might be hiding in. This time he couldn't escape. They brought him into the courtroom in chains. When I saw him again, I nearly collapsed. He didn't look like my son anymore. His face was pale, his beard overgrown. His eyes were empty, like he wasn't even in his body. But when he saw me, he grinned. "I missed you, Mom," he said, as if we were meeting for dinner. I didn't respond. I held Elijah close and stared straight ahead. The judge asked me to stand and read my statement. I walked up slowly, knees shaking, heart pounding. I held the paper in my hand, but I didn't read it. I looked up at the courtroom and spoke from my heart. "My name is Patricia Taylor," I began, "and I am not ashamed anymore." Gasps filled the room. I was abused by the one person I raised with love. I was trapped in silence because no one believed me. 'Cause I was a widow. Because I was alone. But today I speak not just for myself, but for every woman who has been silenced. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I gave birth to 3 innocent children in pain, fear, and shame. But I love them. And I will protect them from ever becoming like their father. I don't want revenge. I want healing. The courtroom was quiet. Dead quiet. Even the judge wiped his eyes. Brian looked confused, like he didn't understand what was happening. He stood up suddenly and shouted, "She's lying. She wanted it. She never said no." The bailiffs grabbed him and forced him back into his seat. The judge banged the gavel. "Order!" I stood tall, wiping my tears. Brian was found guilty of incest, sexual abuse, child endangerment, and stalking. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison with no chance of parole. But even with him locked away, I didn't feel free. Because the deepest prison was inside me. Back at the shelter, I sat alone on the porch with Elijah asleep in my arms. The sun was setting and the wind felt warm. Miss Clara came and sat beside me. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Relieved. But also empty." "That's normal," she said. "You've survived something no one should ever go through. But now it's time to rebuild." He nodded. Then suddenly, one of the women came running from inside. "Patricia, turn on the TV." We rushed in and saw the news. The media had leaked the full story. Photos, details, court files. The world now knew. And soon the hate began to pour in. Messages, accusations. The world didn't care about the truth. They only cared about the headline. And now, I had to face a whole new kind of war. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages flooding the shelter's private phone. I wasn't supposed to see them, but one of the younger women had forgotten to log out of the shared account. The words were poison. "She's disgusting. Should have rotted in jail too. She had her own son's children. And claims she's a victim. Sick. Stop calling her a survivor. She's just as guilty." I dropped the phone. My legs gave way and I sank to the floor, holding Elijah tightly to my chest as I rocked back and forth, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Over and over again. Miss Clara found me like that. She knelt beside me, took Elijah, and placed him gently in the crib. "Don't read what they say," she told me softly. "The world only sees what's loud and shocking. But truth is quiet." "They don't understand," I whispered. "They don't know how I begged for help, how I was trapped." "They don't want to understand," she said. "But you don't owe them anything. You owe it to yourself and your children to keep healing." Still, the shame wrapped around me like chains. Even the women in the shelter began to act differently. They no longer sat next to me during lunch. They no longer asked me to help in the kitchen. They whispered when I passed. Only Mary, the woman who'd told me about her father selling her when she was 12, remained close. "You know," she said one night sitting on my bed, "when people found out what happened to me, they said I must have enjoyed it. That I let it happen. That I was a dirty little girl." I looked at her with tearful eyes. "Why are people so cruel?" "Because facing the truth means they'd have to admit this world is broken," she said. "And they're too scared to fix it." From then on, I held on to Mary's words like a shield. Weeks passed. The shelter started preparing me for reintegration. A new identity, a small apartment, and government assistance to raise the children safely. Elijah was growing fast. His eyes big and curious, his laugh like sunlight after a storm. Then one evening, just as I started to feel like I might be able to live again, I got a call. It was the prison. Brian had been injured in a fight. Badly. He was in the infirmary and had asked for me. Froze. "Don't go," Miss Clara said immediately. "You owe him nothing." But I needed to see him. Not to forgive. Not to comfort. I needed to look him in the eyes one last time. The next day, under strict guard, I was brought to the prison. The walls were high, cold, and gray. The smell of sweat and metal filled the air. They led me down a hall until I reached the prison clinic. Brian was lying on a bed, hooked to IVs, his face swollen from bruises. He opened his eyes slowly and smiled when he saw me. "You came," he croaked. I sat down beside the bed, keeping my distance. "Why did you call me?" I asked. He struggled to sit up, groaning. "Because I had a dream," he whispered. "You and I, and the kids in the old house. Like a family again." "We were never a family," I said flatly. His eyes filled with tears. "I loved you." "No, Brian. You owned me. You used me. You destroyed me." He shook his head. "I thought you wanted it too. You never told me to stop." "I begged you to stop," I said, my voice rising. "But even if I hadn't, it was never your place. I'm your mother. I was your protector. And you violated everything sacred between us." He looked away, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know how to love anyone. Dad never showed me. And you were always the only one who made me feel safe." "I'm sorry too," I said, tears now spilling from my own eyes. "I failed you as a mother. I should have run sooner. I should have fought harder. But I was scared. And broken." We sat in silence for a while. Two wounded souls chained by the past. Then I stood up. "Goodbye, Brian." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "You'll never see me or your children again." As I walked out of the prison, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. But I felt power. I had spoken the truth. And that was the first real step toward freedom. Back at the shelter, I made a decision. I would no longer hide. I would speak out, not just in courtrooms or private sessions, but to the world. With the help of a women's rights group, I agreed to share my story publicly. Not as the woman who had her son's babies, but as the woman who survived and spoke up, even when no one listened. The first video went viral. People began writing letters of support. Some even admitted they judged me too quickly. Others told me their own secrets. Stories of fathers, brothers, uncles, sons who had done the unthinkable. But one message stood out. It was from a young girl named Emma. She wrote, "I'm 13. My stepfather has been hurting me for 2 years. I saw your story. I told my teacher. Safe now. Thank you." I read that message over and over. One story, one voice, saved another. That night I held Elijah in my arms and whispered, "You will never know the pain I did. You will grow in light, in truth, in love." Just as I laid him in his crib, a call came in from the shelter's front desk. There was a woman at the gate. She claimed to be Brian's new wife. And she said she had something to tell me. And just like that, the storm returned. That I remember lying there in pain after delivering the first baby. I didn't know whether to cry for the baby or cry for myself. Had no money. No one brought food. My body was broken, but my heart was even more shattered. My son Samuel didn't even hold the baby. He just looked at the child like it was a duty done and walked away. The midwife, Miss Clara, stayed with me for a few days. She was the only one who spoke gently to me, even though her eyes were full of confusion. "Why are you doing this, Mary?" she asked one night. I couldn't answer. What could I say? That I had no choice. That I was scared. That I didn't even know when things went so wrong. I named the baby Joseph. He had my nose and Samuel's eyes. Every time I looked at him, I felt love and shame mixed together. I tried to breastfeed him and sing to him at night, but deep inside I was dying. Weeks passed, then months. Life settled into something even worse than before. Samuel started acting distant. He didn't hit me like before, but he became cold and silent. When Joseph cried, he would yell at me to shut the baby up. One rainy night, Samuel came back home angry. He had bruises on his face. "What's wrong?" he asked. He pushed me. "None of your business, woman. You're just here to serve." I held my baby tightly and prayed that God would take away my pain. Then the second time happened. I had gone to the stream to fetch water. On my way back, I found Samuel sitting outside the house drunk. I tried to pass quietly, but he stood up and blocked me. His eyes were wild. "You think you're better than me now?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "Let me go inside." He grabbed my arm. "You're still mine. You belong to me." I screamed, but no one came. The neighbors saw me run past them crying, holding my bucket, but they just turned away. After all, I was the crazy widow, the one who let her son touch her. No one wanted to be involved. Weeks later, I knew I was pregnant again. This time I wanted to end it. I tried to take something to stop the baby, but Miss Clara caught me. She cried and begged me not to harm myself. "You've suffered too much," she said. "But don't let this destroy you completely." Gave birth again. Baby girl. I named her Ruth. This time I didn't sing. I didn't smile. I just stared at her and wondered what kind of life she would have. Would people call her names too? Would she also suffer like me? Samuel changed after Ruth was born. He brought home a woman. Her name was Linda. She was young and pretty and very rude. The first time she saw me, she laughed and said, "So this is your mother? Or your wife?" Samuel slapped her right there in front of me. "Don't you ever say that again," he warned her. She didn't understand, but I saw the fear in her eyes. But soon things got worse. Linda was cruel. She didn't want the children near her. She would slap Ruth and Joseph whenever they cried. She would hide food from me. One day, I asked Samuel why he brought her if she was going to treat us badly. He shouted, "Because I needed someone normal around here. Someone who didn't remind me of my shame." A shame. That's what he called me. That's what he called his own children. Then came the worst night. Linda had packed her bags and was about to leave. She had found out. Somehow, someone told her the truth, that Joseph and Ruth were my children, and also Samuel's. She went mad with anger. "You are a disgusting beast," she screamed at Samuel. "You slept with your own mother." The neighbors heard everything. They came out, and I watched as the truth poured into the streets like dirty water. And do you know what happened? Nothing. No one reported him. No one helped me. 'Cause I was the widow. The broken woman. The one who was already lost. A week later I discovered I was pregnant again. And just as I was about to tell Samuel, something happened. I walked into the room, and I saw Ruth crying on the floor, her little arms bruised, Joseph hiding under the table with fear in his eyes. Samuel was standing with a belt in his hand, face twisted in anger. "You little rats. You ruin everything." I screamed. "Stop. They are your children." He turned to me slowly, and with eyes full of madness said, "I know. But I hate them. Just like I hate myself." Then he raised the belt again. And that's when I did something that changed everything. I was holding my second child from my son in my arms, rocking him gently in the corner of our tiny living room, when I heard the familiar creak of the front door. Michael walked in, smelling like liquor and anger. He didn't even look at the baby, just tossed his jacket on the chair and headed straight to the kitchen. The weight of his silence had become heavier than his words. It was like I didn't exist anymore, just a body he used and a womb he filled. That night he didn't touch me. Not in the usual way. But something in his eyes made me shiver. I knew that silence was dangerous. It was the kind that came before something worse. Days passed. My youngest child cried constantly. Barely slept. My body was exhausted and my mind kept drifting to dark thoughts. What had I become? Who was I now? A woman who once walked with pride now couldn't even look in the mirror. All I saw was shame. One morning, I decided to visit an old church I hadn't stepped into in years. I tied my baby on my back and took my oldest child by the hand. As I walked in, I felt all eyes on me. The whispers were louder than prayers. "That's the widow who lives alone with her son. She had another baby. That's the third one now, isn't it? They say the father is her own boy." How sick. I tried to ignore them. I sat at the back pew, bent my head, and cried silently. I wasn't even praying anymore. I was just broken. I just wanted to feel something, anything other than shame. After the service, a woman I had grown up with, Judith, walked toward me. Her face was tight with anger. "Martha," she said sternly, "you need to stop. This is not normal. We all know what's going on. And no one is going to help you unless you help yourself." I looked up at her with tears in my eyes, ready to defend myself, but I couldn't. She was right. I had been too quiet, too afraid, too weak. And it was costing me everything. When I got home, I confronted Michael for the first time. "This has to stop," I said, my voice trembling. "You've taken everything from me. My peace, my dignity, my name." Michael stared at me like I had insulted him. "You think this is my fault? You let it happen. Don't act like a victim now." Those words cut me deeper than any slap. I let it happen. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been too scared to fight. Too lonely to say no. That night, he locked me in the room. Took the children with him. I screamed, kicked the door, cried until my throat burned, but no one came. No one ever came. When he finally opened the door the next day, my babies were nowhere to be seen. "Where are they?" I asked, panic rushing through me. "I gave them to someone," he said coldly. "You don't deserve to raise them." I collapsed on the floor, my body shaking. For the next few days I searched everywhere. No one had seen them. No one wanted to talk to me. The police laughed when I told them. "Your own son. Sounds like a family matter," one of them said. I was alone again. And worse, childless. The children I never asked for. The children I didn't even know how to love properly. They were gone. I cried for nights until my tears dried up. Then one afternoon, a letter came under my door. It was from Michael. "I'm leaving. Don't look for me. The kids are safe. You are poison. You destroy everything." I sat there, the paper shaking in my hands. That was the last time I ever heard from him. I was empty. But life wasn't done with me yet. 3 months later, I started vomiting again. First, I thought it was stress. Or maybe punishment from God. But the swelling in my belly didn't lie. I was pregnant. Again. With a third child from my own son. I fell to my knees in my tiny bathroom, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror. I slapped myself, pulled at my hair, screamed from the bottom of my soul. I wanted to die. I wanted to end everything. But the baby inside me was growing. Quietly. Just like the last two. I stopped going out. I stopped eating much. I would talk to the walls, to the shadows, to the empty cribs in the corner. I was slipping into madness. My belly grew, and with it, my hate for myself. Then one night, I took a long rope from the backyard. I tied it to the ceiling beam. I stood on a chair, looked at the heavens and whispered, "God, I'm sorry." But just before I could step off the chair, I heard a loud knock at the door. Bang, bang, bang. Froze. Then a voice. "Martha, open up. It's Pastor Benjamin." Gasp. My heart raced. How did he know? Why now? I stepped down slowly, shaking. I untied the rope. I walked to the door. But when I opened it, I saw my second child, the one I thought was gone, standing right there, with a woman I had never seen before. She held a note in her hand. And what she said next made me fall to my knees. The night my third child fell sick, I sat by his side with shaking hands and a trembling heart. He was barely breathing. His lips were dry. His tiny chest rose and fell like a bird trapped in a cage. I cried out, but no one answered. I screamed so loudly that my voice cracked. I pounded on the neighbors' doors, holding the child in my arms. Not one person came out. They all knew the story. They had heard the whispers. She's the woman who gave birth to her son's children. And because of that, they saw me as something less than human. I buried that child the next morning. Just me and a shovel. No ceremony. No one stood by my side. That day, something inside me died too. I locked myself inside for days. My other 2 children were hungry, confused, and crying. I had no breast milk left, and no one would sell me milk or food. One woman told me, "Let the children die too. It's better that way. I turned away from her and cried into the corner of my own home. I was still a mother. No matter how shameful the circumstances, I still loved my children. But one day my son, the father of my children, came back. He walked through the door like he owned the place. "You killed him," he said, pointing at the empty mat where our third baby once slept. "I tried," I whispered. "I tried to save him." He slapped me so hard I saw stars. "You only have 2 left," he spat. "You better not let them die too." That night, as I lay on the floor with a swollen face and tears running into my ears, I looked at the 2 children sleeping beside me. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep them here. I couldn't keep me here. So, before the sun rose, I wrapped my children in the only cloth I had. I walked for miles, barefoot, through rocky paths and narrow bush roads, to the next village. Found a small church. The priest looked at me with tired eyes. "You're the woman from the next village," he said. "They speak of you." "I have nothing left to lose," I told him. "I just need these children to live. I don't want them to grow up in this pain." He stared at me for a long time. Then he opened the church doors and let me sleep inside. That was how our second life began. The priest helped me contact a women's organization in the nearby town. They sent people to investigate. First, they didn't believe me. They thought I was lying. But after speaking to some people from my village and seeing the children for themselves, they knew the truth. They called me brave. Brave. After everything I had done, I didn't feel brave. I felt like a shadow of myself. Felt like dirt. But they gave me help anyway. Counseling. Food. Clothes. Safe place to stay. I finally felt what it meant to breathe again. My son was later arrested. Not because of what he did to me, but because he tried to force himself on another woman, and she ran straight to the authorities. The police then discovered more from the past and added charges. He was sentenced. When I heard the news, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just felt nothing. Maybe emptiness was the only thing left in me. Years passed. My 2 remaining children grew into strong, beautiful souls. They knew I was their mother, but not the full story. Not yet. I told them I had been hurt by someone I trusted, and they accepted that for now. One day, I will tell them the full truth. But only when they're ready. Now I sit outside our small home. I have a job. I work at a women's center, helping others who come in with bruises on their faces and silence in their voices. I tell them, your pain does not define you. Your past is not your prison. Sometimes I still cry at night. Sometimes I still hear the voices from the village, calling me names, judging me, rejecting me. But in the morning I open my eyes, and I see 2 reasons to live. My children. This is my story. I didn't choose it. But I survived it. Life lesson for the viewer. No matter how dirty the world tries to make you feel, your value never changes. You are not what was done to you. You are who you choose to become. Silence does not protect, speak out. Even if no one listens at first, keep speaking. There is always a way out. Always. And healing is possible, even from the worst kind of pain. If you like this story and want more emotional and powerful true stories like this one, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Thank you for listening.